Okay, working today. I guess they're letting me have a little moment of breathe. Let's get into it. Hey, what's going on, guys? Let's go ahead and get to this reading. And it's a little late, but my phone went dead, and I was up. I have another platform I can use to upload stuff. Even though it has no service, I can still do stuff with it. I have like 5 different phones. Okay. I can't upload the stuff on here because, well, I don't know. I might be able to, but can't really do nothing with violence. So I have tons of stuff that's not. There's nothing natural about war. Nothing. I detest it at the highest level. Yet, some people would sit there and say I'm desensitized. No, actually, I'm very emotional, but I'm not broken or thin-skinned. I guess that's the term. I've seen more than enough. So, but I shared it with some of the guys in our chat. The ladies ain't saying nothing, but go figure. So, how y'all doing this afternoon? Let's go ahead and get into this reading. I'm going to start with the Iron Republic. Then we're going to get right into the Navigate Across the Ice Walls. Carry on from there. And we're going to read. Pull it out. Because I just washed this hat. I got my socks. Come on, because I got to take him back outside, you guys. We're not going to mess with the original history of ancient America. We'll read that tomorrow. But we're going to get to Arthur Kessler's 13th Tribe and Mr. Will Cooper. All right. So I'm reading some other stuff there. So, all right, let's get into it. Republic. We're pretty ways back. So I'll read quite a bit of this. I just took a shower. Cold shower. Woo. Somebody's out there saying a whole lot of something or nothing. All right, let's go. That's my favorite music. Anyway, in this moment of deadly peril, I believe that all that was best and noblest in me asserted itself, and like a flash, it occurred to me that the rent canvas, while not sufficient to bear up to, would probably drop gently enough with one to avoid fatal consequences. Now, you know this is the plane they were flying, or whatever the vehicle, okay? Just to remind you, I didn't want to start from that point, okay? Now, with the thought came the resolve, and in less than a second after the aeroplane began to fall, I had thrown loose the strap that bound me to my seat, and rising upon the pedal, leaned over until my lips almost touched the blanched face of the woman I loved, and shouted. For the whipping of the rent canvas made a noise like that of a hurricane. It is death for one, and I love you, and I can die for you. Then let it be death for both, she cried, letting go of the bar and throwing both arms around my neck with a vice-like grip. For I love you and cannot live without you. One kiss, oh my darling, pressing my lips to hers with a thrill that made me to forget the peril of death, and then throwing myself forward, dropped from the pedal. But the fair arms about my neck were strong, and though I struggled to break loose, knowing that the velocity at which we were falling meant certain death for both of us, they held me fast. Down, down, down we fell, with a quivering, fluttering motion like a winged bird dropping to earth, and choked to blindness and suffocation. I was expecting to feel the impact that would crush us against the ground when I became dimly conscious of a fierce shrieking sound above us, and then our downward motion seemed to be arrested. A moment later, we struck the earth with a shock that seemed to break every bone in my body. With a great wave of thankfulness, I realized that we were saved, and disengaging the fair arms that still wound around my neck like band of steel, I struggled to my feet and hastily unbuckled the strap that bound the beautiful form of my heart's idol to the wrecked machine, dragged her fainting from under the aeroplane. My first concern was to ascertain if she were killed or injured, and laying her gently on the grass, I found to my unspeakable joy that she was alive and bore no marks of injury. Loosening the close-fitting bodice at the throat that she might breathe more freely, and fanning her vigorously with my handkerchief, I was rewarded in a few moments by seeing her open her eyes and look up at me with an expression of an inexpressible tenderness. "Oh, my love," she said, holding up her hands to me. It took that moment for them to grasp and realize they were in love. After all that swashbuckling literacy, verbal literacy, and kung fu or karate, whatever you want to call it, in the past passages. "Oh, my love," she said, holding up her hands to me, "then you would indeed have died for me." "1,000 times," I cried rapturously, seizing her hands and covering them with kisses. "Now you shall be mine forever and ever." "No, no, it cannot be," she exclaimed hastily, withdrawing her hands and springing to her feet. "What does this mean?" Running back to the aeroplane with an expression of terror, I followed her and saw with astonishment that another aeroplane was foul with ours and lay upon it. "What indeed?" I cried, seizing the end of it and lifting it up. "Oh, can't you see that it is Professor Holmes? Don't you see his harp? Oh my God!" And with a shuddering cry of horror, she covered her face and with her hands and fell upon her knees, moaning and crying. Then it dawned upon me that the noble man had swooped down and, attaching his machine to ours, had thrown himself to death to save our lives. Leaving the weeping woman, I ran to a group of people who had gathered some little distance away and were talking and gesticulating, gesticulating wildly. And there, crushed and dead, lay the noblest man and greatest genius that ever lived. In his godlike nobility of soul, he had caught our airplane several hundred feet above the earth, and seeing that it could not sustain all and prevent us from being crushed against the earth, he had thrown himself down to a horrible death that his affianced might escape with his rival. I wonder not that at last, when earthly passion had been chilled by the cold touch of death, and the dross of mortality scarce intervened, that it was the wondrous melody of his nocturne that she heard above the roaring of the frozen sea, rolling down from beyond error. She passed, and I felt no pang of jealousy. If in the house of many mansions were there no marrying and giving in marriage, but all are as the angels of God in love and purity, I may be accounted worthy of the humblest station in this sphere. I shall be content, and yet she loved me and not him. Wow. Kneeling by him, I raised the noble head and chafed the poor broken hand that held within them the potency of such divine harmony as the world will never hear again. But the great soul had passed. Death was doubtless instantaneous, for though his face was unmarred, his body was horribly crushed and broken. Dispatching one of the bystanders to convey intelligence of the accidents to the city, I went back and raised the weeping girl who was to have been the dead man's wife. "My darling," I said, lifting her gently, "would you have been true to him? And he was a godlike man and worthy of your troth. But surely the hand of Providence is in this terrible thing. Will you go and look upon him?" Taking my arm without speaking, I led her to where our Savior lay upon the ground, and with a solemn grace and dignity that was really majestic, she walked around to the dead man's feet and looked long and calmly at his face. "Thou wert too pure and great to be loved as a man," she spoke at last, "and in the presence of the dead clay, I feel an unworthy as genuverse at the feet of the pure and royal author. Alas! The world has lost its greatest spirit, and I a friend of whom I could never be worthy." Then as I led her away, oh my Thou art not and never can be so good or great a man, and yet I love you. It's the ice. This is by Frederick Edwin Church in 1861. It's a painting. One of the crew. Tomorrow we'll get into chapter 10. And this is the last chapter. It's phenomenal. It's magical. I hope that was read well. Let's go ahead. Let me say hi to everybody in here. I know we're not going to have a lot of people, but it's still a beautiful thing. Rondo Gajo, what's going on, beloved? T. Hines, Max V, Alito, what's going on, Chukma, excuse me. Hey, Snoo, what's up, baby girl? Big Pontiac, greetings, brother. Appreciate you all coming in. We're going to go ahead and read this and then get into the last two books. Just a couple of chapters in those. I always say a couple of chapters, but we're just going to, not a couple of paragraphs, excuse me. Because it is late and I still have to eat. Besides the fact that I had piece, I only ate one, y'all. Toast with peanut butter and bananas and cinnamon. I'm hungry, but I'm not starving at least. I don't know what the last few days was when I was eating at 12 and 1 in the morning. I don't know. Anyway, the navigator who crossed the ice walls, worlds beyond Antarctica, Nos Confundum by Claudio Nocelli. Excellent read. This is before that. Okay. So we're in chapter 3. We have crossed the walls. Oh, was it? Then we were at the human reset. My apologies. No, we have crossed up. We have crossed the walls, right? Yes. Here we are. We have crossed. This is the chapter 3. My apologies. Because we get into the war. Something that you don't hear in that one, because you got to remember, that's around 50, 60, something years later. I just want to, add this. And Mr. Morris is still alive. You got to remember, he was a young man after the Revolutionary War, I believe. The Civil War, Revolutionary, one of the two. Anyway, by this time, World War II had took place. So it's a good while. And it's known that there they live a lot longer. Now, for some reason, we're given a reprieve over there to live a little longer, but not as long as we can. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and get to this. Chapter 3, we have crossed the walls. We set sail at last from Charleston Harbor, and Captain Butler was leading this adventure that we calculated between a few stops to arrive with enough provisions. We would be reaching the cold Antarctic waters about 140 to 150 days at the most. That's about 4 months, give or take. As we left, we all had a mixture. Is he in the wall? I was like, where did he go? Excuse me. As we left, we all had a mixture of excitement. Notifications. I forgot to turn it off. My apologies. Excitement and panic from everything we had experienced in the previous days. We were also not quite sure why Butler had hidden himself in this way. Had we become the enemies of a force we were going to be able to actually face? Now, Butler also mentioned another race. What had we really gotten ourselves into? The days went by and everything was going very well. We had plenty of provisions and the companions were encouraging each other. Beyond some sporadic storms, the ship withstood the winds very well. When crossing the equator, we made some stops and stocked up again on the advice of the captain, who told us that the trip was going to be longer than we expected in the case of being able to cross the South Pole. Now, we were also able to bring some cases of bottles of alcohol. Although the heat of the tropic at that time did not let us think clearly, it was known that times of darkness and cold in the black waters of the South were approaching. It is beautiful in the Antarctic. When you go, you get around the Horn, and they do it intentionally because it's calm waters. We were in storms with waves that were over 200 feet crashing over the carrier deck. Listen to me, y'all. And we're talking about the Vietnam era, a carrier that was built in the 50s. Mm-hmm. The Forrestal. The first time I went around the horn was on the USS Forrestal. Oh my goodness. The fire damage, you can still see the fire and stuff from the bombs that blew up. No, we worked that ship. You hear me? It was a 2 months cruise, just right around the horn up to California. Anyway, the second night of leaving the last port straight to Antarctica, I was on deck looking at the horizon and thinking about this adventure. Now the memories came. Let's memorize the memories. Came all together to my mind. Everything I left behind, and if this turning against someone powerful was really worth it. I had an inner fire of curiosity, though, and to know about this passage, if it was really possible to cross it. I wondered what would be behind. While all this was going through my mind, Butler approached me. Already cold, comrade. You can't imagine what awaits you then, he asked me. So you've been there, I asked again. Where do you mean? In the southern waters? Yes, of course, Butler affirmed. That story you were telling that night, was it about you? I was there, William. I saw that passage with my own eyes. That's why I'm wanted. All doubt left my mind. The captain then gave a clear version about his past voyage, and the lights went on in me and illuminated all curiosity. I couldn't wait to fill him with questions, but he stopped me right there, almost as if reading my mind. Then he told me, "Don't worry, William. You will see it too. You will see what I saw with my eyes, and you won't believe it either. And I'm not just talking about the passage, but I won't talk about it until we can get there." Now, the captain closed the conversation at the best moment. I had as many questions as this guy Morris has a lot of questions. You hear how inquisitive he is over there, being a Navy, the head man. The captain closed the conversation at the best moment. I had as many questions as the reader will have at this moment, and I assure you that they will be answered in due time. Now, the intrigue ate me inside, and my face was the same tone as the reddish sun that began to appear on the horizon. At 138 days, we were in the icy waters, and the sudden difference was abysmal. The water was dark, and as dark as the waves that swung us from one side to the other. Now, the storm that had been chasing us for 8 days was getting worse, and the captain was calm, and that gave us some security. But every time a wave crashed against our boat, in our minds, we could not remember the warm home we were leaving behind. But I was confident in this mission. I knew somehow that it was going to give us its fruits. Now listen, we crossed a huge mountain that we had as a reference, where warm and cold winds intermingled even under the snow. As strange as the waters were we were sailing, it was very difficult to describe this place. It is simply unique. It has a beauty that enamors, even being aware that a second is enough to end your life against the huge masses of ice floating around. Now, we were now sailing parallel to a giant wall of ice that loomed, and we calculated that it would be between 80 and 90 meters high. Whoo! And in some places, there were peaks of even more height, but it was impossible to see it. The sleet could be seen up to a certain height, and what we noticed and called our attention, except the captain who had already experienced it, is that reddish and yellow color that sometimes appears on the horizon, as if a ravenous fire of some force was raging behind. Remember, in Iron Republic, they saw the same. Near this giant mountain, it is beautiful, quite beautiful out there. Near this giant mountain, blocks of ice feel like absorbent cotton on a mattress of snow, forming a steep slope where the snow water melted and cascaded into the sea. An imposing image with this kind of reflection of fire behind. If this were portrayed in a painting, they would pay millions to have it. This view overwhelmed with a unique beauty and a sepulchral silence accompanying the lonely boat that the team decided to name The Secret. Now the weather was inhospitable. It did not give us any respite, and the fight was deadly against the waves and the wind. Now the danger of collision against the great masses of ice and the water that fell on us, a cry from the sky, we decided then to approach again to the enormous mount, and the strange heat emanating from the melting ice all around gave the strange appearance that it did not fit, that it should not be there, but it even seemed to generate a different climate. And we decided that the captain to skirt it was much as possible and investigate thoroughly this strange portion in front of the giant ice barriers. Butler shouted my name and called me on deck. A passage opened up between the giant frozen walls, and the happiness that enveloped us was unexplainable. But we knew that we would not be there for a long time. Now, Butler did not hesitate for a second, and we were all stunned. The ship was heading that way, and the captain seemed to know what he was doing and left the boat parallel to the promontory. And then a kind of current took us inside without even thinking twice. We were dragged by an enormous force. Fear paralyzed us, and we brushed the edges of that wall several times. All this panic lasted 3 or 4 minutes, but inside us it seemed to be eternal. Suddenly, and once we were sailing on this current that was dragging us, calm seemed to invade our surroundings. The storm ceased, and although the cold was still lashing, it was no longer overwhelming. We were in an inexplicable ecstasy. This narrow passage was opening more and more and gave way to an open sea. My eyes did not lie, although I doubted them several times. And the captain shouted, "We made it! We made it! Yes, we can! Yes, we can!" And we all celebrated with surprise and amazement. We were in waters that only very few reached, or so we thought at that moment at least. The dark waters began to clear, and the ice walls were still visible, but were being lost in the distance. Now the sun that contemplated our feet was falling on the horizon. It was time to boast. Does that mean for a drink or a toast? I gathered the team by decision of the captain, who called us all with some seriousness. He was going to make an important announcement. He began by saying that what he was going to comment was not about him, nor about the team, nor about the known earth we were leaving behind. It was about the whole of humanity and its past. And tomorrow we get in chapter 4, The War Behind the Walls. This is where it gets interesting. You're going to like it. Okay. Oh, there it is. I bought some more of these things. I don't know why. It's good to have enough of everything. You can't have too little, nothing, you know. Yeah, just put I don't like marking in this book, but I'm going to put it right in this side. Even though I know it's chapter 4. Okay. It's vitamin D. Get your butt here, sunshine. I got about a month left. That was a 6-month supply. Okay, let's get into Arthur Kessler and the 13th Tribe. Excellent reading. Okay, let's get into Arthur Kessler, 13th Tribe. Any new subscribers? I see we had 2 more. Appreciate you guys. Hang in there. This is what I do. I read. No, I grind my gears in the morning at AM. Yet, I feel like reading is what I really need to be doing. And TikTok, I will be reading. I think Wednesday is when I start reading. I'm going to be uploading videos. I actually have about 12 more people subscribe. I don't know. TikTok, people subscribe fast over there. I don't know what's going on over here. Well, whatever it is, we know what it is. Egos, people think some kind of competition, people that don't really know nothing. But anyway, let's get into it. Race and myth. Now, the Jews of our times fall into 2 main divisions, Sephardim and Ashkenazim. Now, you know that the Iranians are Sephardic, right? Okay. The Sephardim are descendants of the Jews who, since antiquity, had lived in Spain. in Hebrew, Sephar, okay, until they were expelled at the end of the 15th century and settled in the countries bordering on the Mediterranean. The Balkans, and to a lesser extent in Western Europe, they spoke a Spanish Hebrew dialect, Latino, Latino. See, well, chapter 7. We're not going to deal with all that. And, excuse me, and preserve their own traditions and religious rites in the 1960s. Now, the number of Sephardim was estimated at 500,000. A lot of them are Muslim now. They don't even know who they are. And they are a hybridized mix. More Ashkenaz, Kadar, and about 5 other of the tribes of Gomer. Just letting you know this. You study up on it and know it for yourself, okay? So the Ashkenazism at the same period numbered about 11 million. Thus, in common parlance, Jew is practically synonymous with Ashkenazi Jew. But the term is misleading, for the Hebrew word Ashkenaz was, in medieval rabbinical literature, applied to Germany, thus contributing to the legend that modern Jewry originated on the Rhine. There is, however, no other term to refer to the non-Sephardic majority of contemporary Jewry. Excuse me. And, excuse me. For the sake of piquantry, it should be mentioned that the Ashkenaz of the Bible refers to a people living somewhere in the vicinity of Mount Ararat. It's pronounced different, but I don't feel like all the rolling R stuff. And Armenia. The name occurs in Genesis 10:3 and 1 Chronicles 1:6 as one of the sons of Gomer. Seriously, it is. It's there. And that's why it boggles my mind when these Christians and Catholics and all of them looking at these things as if they're the true Hebraic people. That's why I tell you to pay attention. Let me read this so you can look it up for all you people that have the Torah, the Talmud. Well, I hope you don't have the Talmud, but the Torah and a few other books in that regimen and the King James Version. I don't think in the New Testament things been played with so much yet. You can take a look for yourself. I don't mess with a lot of the new ones. I've got about several to 12 versions, and I only mess with one really, just for study purposes. Genesis 10, chapter 3, and 1 Chronicles 1 and 6. As one of the sons of Gomer, who was a son of Japhet. Ashkenaz is also a brother of Togarmah and a nephew of Magog. When you want to talk about the Mongols, whom the Khazars, according to the King Joseph, claimed as their ancestor. See above. We already went over that. But worse was to come. For Ashkenaz is also named in Jeremiah 51 and 27, where the prophet calls his people and their allies to rise and destroy Babylon. What if Babylon wasn't the bad place at all? And the new Babylon is what we're dealing with now. And old Babylon was Tartary. You guys got to do research. I just gave some tea. Let's see what people say now who don't want to come over here and support and watch. Call thee upon the kingdoms of Ararat, Mini, and Ashkenaz. This passage was interpreted by the famous Saadia Gaon, spiritual leader of Oriental Jewry in the 10th century, as a prophecy relating to his own times. Babylon symbolized the caliphate of Baghdad, and the Ashkenaz who were to attack it were either the Khazars themselves or some allied tribe. Accordingly, says Polyak, some learned Khazar Jews who heard of the Gaon's ingenious arguments called themselves Ashkenazim. When they immigrated to Poland, it does not prove anything, but it adds to the confusion. Because you got to remember, in the 6th century is when they murdered off the original ones whose identity they took. The coup d'etat, remember we read that back in the first 2 passages. Okay, just keeping you with me. Summing up a very old and bitter controversy is the iconic paragraph Raphael Paté wrote. The findings of physical anthropology show that, contrary to popular view, There is no Jewish race. Thank you, made up. I told you, I've been telling you that for a long time. I didn't have to read this to know that. Anthropomorphic, that's what my uncles would tell you. If you call them Jew, they will beat them old 60, 70-year-old big muscle bound will over six, both of them will beat the smack out of any of you. They know Mike Tyson very well too. So I'm gonna say, anthropomorphic measurements of Jewish groups in many parts of the world indicate that they differ greatly from one another with respect to all the important physical characteristics: stature, weight, skin color, capillate index, facial index, and blood groups, etc. This indeed is the accepted view today among anthropologists and historians. Moreover, there is a general agreement that comparisons of cranial indices, blood types, etc., show a greater similarity between Jews and their Gentile host nation than between Jews living in different countries. Yet, paradoxically, the popular belief that Jews, or at least certain types of Jews, can be instantly recognized as such must be dismissed out of hand, for the simple reason that it has a factual basis in everyday existence. The anthropologist's evidence seems to be at loggerheads with common observation. However, before attempting to tackle the apparent contradiction, it will be useful to look at a few samples of the data on which the anthropologist's denial of a Jewish race is based. To start with, here is a quotation from the excellent series of booklets on the race question in modern science, published by UNESCO. UNESCO. Y'all know about that now, don't you? With all this bull crap going on. The author, Professor Juan Comas, draws the following conclusion from the statistical material, his italics, mind you. Thus, despite the view usually held, the Jewish people is racially heterogeneous. Its constant migrations and its relations, voluntary or otherwise, with the widest variety of nations and peoples have brought about such a degree of crossbreeding that the so-called people of Israel can produce examples of traits typical of every people. For proof, it will suffice to compare the rubicund, sturdy, heavily built Rotterdam Jew, and with his co-religionist, say, in Salonika, with gleaming eyes and a sickly face, and high-strung physique. Hence, so far as our knowledge goes, we can assert that Jews as a whole display as great a degree of morphological disparity among themselves as could be found between members of two or more different races. Next, we must glance at some of the physical characteristics which anthropologists use as criteria, and one which Comas' conclusions are based. One of the simplest, and as it turned out, most naive of this criteria was bodily stature. In The Races of Europe, a monumental work published in 1900, William Ripley wrote, "The European Jews are all undersized. Not only this, they are more often absolutely stunted." He was up to a point right at that time, and he produced ample statistics to prove it. But he was shrewd enough to surmise that this deficiency in height might somehow be influenced by environmental factors, raw meat, blood. 11 years later, Maurice Fishburne's The Jews, a study of race and environment, the first anthropological survey of its kind in English. It revealed the surprising fact that the children of Eastern Europe Jewish immigrants to the USA grew to an average height of 167.9 centimeters, compared to the 164.2 centimeter average by their parents, a gain of nearly an inch and a half in a single generation. Since then, it has become a commonplace that the descendants of immigrants, populations, whether Jews, Italians, or Japanese, because we know that in 16,000 they were conquered by the Gog, Kadars, Magog, and all of them. The Ano people, a very dark race of people, our brethren. That's why the Hatak people went there and gave them fighting scrolls and everything else, but they still fell. Are considerably taller than their parents, no doubt owing to their improved diet and other environmental factors. Fishberg then collected statistics comparing the average height of Jews and Gentiles in Poland, Austria, Romania, Hungary, and so on. They did not mention the fact that the majority of them were Negro stock. There was, while they were being conquered, but you know what I mean. And women like the dumbasses here sleeping with a whole bunch of them damn people and making these new things run around. I have crazy now. The result again was a surprise. In general, it was found that the stature of the Jews varied with the stature of the non-Jewish population among which they lived. They were relatively tall, where the indigenous population is tall, and vice versa. Moreover, within the same nation and even within the same town, Warsaw, the bodily height of Jews and Gentiles was found to vary according to the degree of prosperity of the district. All this does not mean that heredity has no influence on height, but it is overlaid and modified by environmental influences and is unfit as a criterion of race. Now, we may now turn to cranial measurements, which were once the great fashion among anthropologists, but are now considered rather outdated. Here we meet again with the same type of conclusion derived from the data. A comparison of the cephalic indices of Jewish and non-Jewish population in various countries reveals a marked similarity between the Jewish and non-Jewish indices in many countries, while showing very wide variations when the cephalic indices of Jewish populations inhabiting different countries are compared. Thus, one is driven to the conclusion that this feature is plasticity, notwithstanding, points to a racial diversity of the Jews. Now, this diversity, it should be noted, is most pronounced between Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews. By and large, the Sephardim are they're long-headed people, okay? I can't get that word out. The Ashkenazim and brachycephalic, broad-headed, and Kusteda saw in this difference a further proof, notification, I just heard it, further proof of the separate racial origin of Khazar Ashkenazi and Semitic Sephardic Jews are covariant with the host nations, which to some extent invalidates the argument. The statistics relating to other physical features also speak against racial unity. Generally, Jews are dark-haired and dark-eyed, but how general is generally when according to Comas? 49% of Polish Jews were light-haired, and 54% of Jewish schoolchildren in Austria had blue eyes. It is true that Warsaw found only 32% of blood Jewish schoolchildren in Germany, whereas the proportion of blonde Gentiles was larger. But that merely shows that the covariance is not absolute, as one would expect. Now, the hardest evidence to date comes from classification by blood groups. A great amount of work has recently been done in this field, but it will be sufficient to quote a single example with a particularly sensitive indicator in Pate's words. With regard to blood type, I'm traveling bear. Why you ain't here, bro? Anyway, with regard to blood type, Jewish groups show considerable differences among themselves and marked similarities to the Gentiles. Environment. The Hertzfeld biochemical index, A plus AB, B plus AB, can be used most conveniently to express this. A few typical examples are German Jews, 274, German Gentiles, 263, Roman Jews, 154, Romanian Gentiles, 155, Polish Jews, 194, Polish Gentiles, 155, Moroccan Jews, 163, Moroccan Gentiles, 163, Iraqi Jews, 122, Iraqi Gentiles, 137, Turkestan Jews, 0.97, Turkestan Gentiles, 0.99. One might sum up this situation in two mathematical formulas. GA minus JA is greater than JA minus JB. And GA minus GB is equivalent to JA minus JB. Gentile to Jew. That is to say that, broadly speaking, the difference in requests of anthropological criteria between Gentiles and Jews is a given country is smaller than the difference between Jews in different countries, A and B, and the difference between Gentiles in countries A and B is similar to the difference between Jews in A and B. It seems appropriate to wind up this section with another quotation from Harry Shapiro's contribution to the UNESCO series, The Jewish People, A Biological History. And there is a book. Now, the wide range of variations between Jewish population and their physical characteristics and the diversity of the gene frequencies, and we all know A plus AB and AB plus AB have nothing to do with the original people. Anyway, of their blood groups, render any unified racial classification for them a contradiction in terms. For although modern racial theory admits some degree of polymorphism or variation with a racial group, it does not permit distinctly different groups measured by its own criteria or race to be identified as one. To do so would make the biological purposes of racial classification futile and the whole procedure arbitrary and meaningless. Unfortunately, this subject is rarely wholly divorced from non-biological considerations, and despite the evidence, efforts continue to be made to somehow segregate the Jews as a distinct racial ethnicity. And I've already proved that because I know people from Africa who don't even have O positive or negative bloodline. Now I know many people on the west coast of it, the so-called west coast. We know it's not, but the millions of people left here and went over there, even their blood has got bastardized, but they're still O positive, a lot more O positive. And maybe every once in a while, I've come across a few people with O negative. Science always grabs those people. But the majority of O positive or negative, and you see some of them have O positive blood, that's because the whitewashing of history and the sisters who keep sleeping with these anyway, right? And what happens is when you have a baby running around with blue or green eyes, gray eyes, blonde or brown hair, pale skin looking like Lena Horne, about 5, 6 foot tall, a Jew, an Ashkenazi. But it's not a real race. I keep telling you all that. For Hebraism was a lifestyle, a way of life. It had nothing to do with no made up damn religion. Have I read enough? So, how did this twin phenomenon, diversity in somatic features and conformity to the host nation, come about? We'll get into that tomorrow. I hope that was a good reading. You know what I'm doing, right? I'm showing you how things changed, who changed it, and how, and those who allowed the change to happen. If you've been paying attention, you know exactly where I'm going, where I'm coming from, and how it's playing out. But this is only for information purposes. That's all. It's up to you what you do with it. I don't have to do nothing with it. Just read to you guys. You know what? I'm going to read that with that tomorrow, right? So, good. Let's put that back on. Let's get into Mr. William Cooper. Now, here we're going to just read a couple paragraphs. Okay? Because I'm hungry. Behold a pale horse, Mr. William Cooper. We're on chapter 8, people. Oklahoma, HB 1750. Test case for the police state. Let's get right into it. It's very short. Okay. Oklahoma, HB 1750. The police state's test case. Gary North recently wrote about one of the scariest pieces of socialistic police state legislation to arrive on the scene to date. On January 1st, 1991, a new 96-page state law goes into effect, HB 1750. Pull it up, Snoo. HB 1750, passed last year, 1989. It requires all Oklahoma residents to declare everything they own to the tax collector. Everything, guns, coins, art collections, furniture, business equipment, bank accounts, household furniture, and so on. Forms will be distributed through banks. Any taxpayer who refuses to fill out the form and submit it to the tax assessor by March 15th the Ides of March, will be visited by an assessor. He will ask permission to enter the home or place of business. If this request is denied, he will be issued a search warrant, and any property not previously listed or undervalued will be assessed a penalty of up to 20% of its market value. This will make renters into property taxpayers and make life easy for the gun grabbers. We see that happening with IRS arming 80 something. Come on, y'all. 80 something people hired that quick, trained in 2 years. What are the investment implications of this? Invest in a good gun and be standing on your porch with gun in hand when they pay you a visit. It is clear where the tax collectors are headed next. Oklahoma will be a test case. If they can pull this one off, the other states will follow. Big Brother wants to know all and to tax all. Eventually, the New World Order will eliminate all private property, redistribute the wealth, and this inventory will tell them how much exists and exactly where it is stored. Of course, the Oklahoma tax assessor will share its information with other federal and state agencies. Now, will they get away with this blatant disregard for civil and constitutional rights? Exactly the reason for the law, to find out if it will meet with strong or violent opposition. If the citizens of Oklahoma lie down and allow this to happen, then you can bet everyone else in the nation is going to be subjected to the same or similar law. It is time to stand up with a weapon and scream, enough. It is time to draw the line. It is time to make decisions and carry them out. It is time to resist at any and all costs. The penalty for failing to do so is slavery. That is death in itself. It is not time for rebellion. It is time for restoration. The Constitution must be again, as it once was, the supreme law of the land. Federalism is the treason, and up and fight. For sources, HB 1750, legislation of the Oklahoma State House of Representatives, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, 1989. North Gary, Big Brother wants to see it all in Oklahoma. The McAlvany Intelligence Advisory, July 1990. And next, chapter 9, we will get into Anatomy of an Alliance. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this old fogey read. I truly appreciate it. My apologies again. And we will be back at it tomorrow. I appreciate you all. Put these socks on, man. I gotta take the cat outside before I eat. And Rondo, again, thanks for the donation, brother. I appreciate you, bro. You know I love you, bro. Always. Anybody else, you're more than welcome. Yes, I've got about, I told Snoo I got about 50. I told y'all about 30. I've been clicking off. I've been finding books that I couldn't even find before. For some reason, all of a sudden they're there. The third books and books and a few other books not on Amazon, because Amazon's not going to give you all the good stuff. You dig what I'm saying? But I appreciate y'all. Let me shout you guys out. Anybody else that came in, I appreciate it. And we're going to get off of here. Hey, Andrew, that's fine. Totally is fine. Thanks, you. Appreciate you. Hey, what's going on, beloved? Anybody else come in who I didn't call up? Original, if you already know, brother. I'm like just in the house. Yes. I appreciate you guys coming in and speaking up and hanging in there. USS Star, that was me. You took it around the horn. I forget what year. But love, it's 52 minutes, so we stayed under an hour, which is pretty awesome. I think they're cool. Hey, Max B, there are too many poo-poos out there. I've been sending a lot of engaging both friends, family, and strangers to not turn on each other when it's the fan. You know what? Tell them to come on over here, man. Subscribe, and sit back and listen. I know it's kind of hard for a lot of people. I want to see unity all around, but we have to. The historicals are abundant, and most people will have a hard time letting go of those lies, which is sadly, and that's their own destruction. You know, if people, I don't know how many people said it. I know it's a few. If people knew who we really were, the world would it would flip on its head. But most people are pretty ignorant, and they choose not to know. They don't want to know. because they have sided on the side of the lies. Let me tell you something. But there's a creator, and a creator of all this. But it's not for us to worry, because he put enough of himself in every one of us. And that is what they attempt to deaden. If they make you believe, I don't like the words God and all that other stuff. We don't need a name. We're supposed to live accordingly, a certain way. And that's sufficient enough. Live righteously, if that's the word we want to use. Appreciate y'all, and I will see y'all tomorrow in the AM. Thank you.